because as you guys have been able to tell, we have made a new development in our build's progress. Thank you, Nico, for the sub, bro. Big flex for you. Thanks for pumping us up. The streams have been amazing. The drops, you guys can just hang out and get some cool transmog loot. You guys can gift 2 subs to the stream, and that'll get you this sweet mount that I'm riding. The stream's just been popping off, and we are currently within 1,000 subs of doing something I never thought we would ever do on this stream. Even though the stream is amazing and I love it, I didn't think we would ever reach the point where we could unlock every single like Twitch emote. And we're like 1,000 subs away from that currently, which is a lot of subs, but if we keep it going, we might be able to do it, which is pretty wild. But what we're gonna do first things first is go over the build that I've been playing. So what I'm going to call this one, the endgame build that we've been playing, is the BLEEDZERKER. It invests into rend, crit, and attack speed to just make you like a samurai Wolverine, just like slicing and dicing through mobs. It's blasting. Absolutely blasting. I really like it a lot. It is not even yet complete, and it's also sort of hindered slightly by the fact that 2 of the aspects that we like have been disabled for who knows how long. Like, I'm not sure when they're going to be re-enabled, but the Edge Masters and the Berserk Ripping aspects, both of which are really, really good for this build and things that we've liked before, were disabled. So we weren't actually using them before in my build, but as soon as I realized what they were, I was like, oh, I want to use those. So Edge Masters is this one, where skills deal a % increased damage based on your available primary resource when cast, receiving the maximum benefit when you have full primary resource. That would be nice. We don't have it. Bummer. This one is also insane. Whenever you deal direct damage while berserking, inflict a percentage of the base damage dealt as additional bleeding damage over 5 seconds. Also insane. It's bleeding damage. We scale bleeding damage. It would have been wild. It would have been great for our build. I probably would have put this on my 2 two-handers, right? I put this one on 1 two-hander and this one on the other. But we're not doing that. So I don't want to dive too deep into the enchants thing or the aspects thing right now, because I want to go over the talents first, because there's a lot to talk about here. But in the meanwhile, when we can't use these, we'll use something else, okay? Now, we'll talk about the aspects in a second. What this build is doing is it is an evolution, okay? It is an evolution from the Bleed Thorns leveling build into the starting world tier, getting into world tier 4, starting world tier 4, heavy bleed build. And then now we've been into tier 4 for a while, and now we're getting serious. Now we're really cooking with the build. And we're going to answer lots of questions in chat like we always do, but I'm going to focus up on getting this content out for the homies. So listen up. You guys have been wanting this build for a while, so don't be asking me, how do I swap weapons? Like, nope, that's what the FAQ video. This is serious, all right? This is serious. But you guys should refer to the exclamation mark FAQ video if you guys are new. You should go check out the beginner tips. That answers a lot of questions that you might have. We stream on Twitch. Like, during the weekday, we stream, like, 10 hours a day. Morning streams usually, starting, I don't know, today we're starting early, but anyway, stream early, and then we stream late as well in the treadmill, and then we do the VODs in between so you guys can earn drops and stuff. And the best way to tell if it's a VOD or not is whether it says on the top of the screen it's a VOD, okay? Just to clarify that. But let's go ahead and clarify this first, too. Our technique that we're using is I'm mostly using a sword as my chosen weapon, so in which case I'm using the technique, the expertise, for the axe. If I was to use an axe, I would be using the sword expertise, because you can't stack these. If I was using a sword, I can't get double sword expertise, but you can benefit from axe expertise by talenting into it, right? So that makes sense. So if you're using a sword, use axe expertise. If you're using an axe, use sword expertise. That's simple. Does big damage. Big damage. It is awesome. It is juicy. That's a one-handed sword, by the way. You want two-handed sword. That's the one. But anyway, I had this maxed out, but I was hovering over one-handed, but it's two-handed out here, just to be clear. Okay, so some of our abilities. Some of these things have changed. You guys are looking at my thing and you're like, whoa! Did you drop chains? Is chains bad now? It's like, no. No. It's not that chains is bad. It's that the build has ascended. Okay? The build has ascended. We have been able to solve for applying vulnerability consistently and then reapplying it consistently enough that we can now no longer rely on chains to apply vulnerability, and we can start to do fun things. Well, even more fun things. Chains was cool too. But we can move past our 5 chains weapon, which is cool because the 5 chains is awesome, and it's really hard to go back to chains when you don't have 5 of them anymore. So I upgrade my weapon, which I'll show you, and then we go into Berserk. So let's look at this a little bit though. That's the basics. The way and the reason why and when you can switch over to not using chains anymore at its most basic level is you can either put exploit in as your very first glyph if you wanted to, or you could put it in your second glyph, and I think I'd recommend going for the second glyph if you can, and it gets even better if you wait till you get your third Paragon as well. It'll be fine the whole time, but this is the glyph that makes it possible. Exploit, right? But you need to make sure that you're getting the bonus of the 25 dexterity within the radius, because for this one, when an enemy is damaged by you, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. This cannot happen more than once every 20 seconds. So this means that your first hit on an enemy makes them vulnerable on everything. So you don't really need chains to apply your vulnerability anymore. And then you also still have Rend that extends your vulnerability. Right? Where's Rend? It extends your vulnerability, which is awesome. So targets are going to be vulnerable from you pretty consistently, especially if you go into Decimator, where two-handed slashing weapon attacks have up to an 8% chance to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds on lucky hit, which doesn't sound like a lot, but Ren's lucky hit chance is pretty high baseline. It's like 33%, so you know it's pretty low, but I think you'll still find that your vulnerability is sufficient, right? Especially because you're extending it, so you don't really need chains so much anymore. Although chains, again, is fantastic. Chains is excellent when you don't have ways of applying vulnerability consistently, because you do the chains, right? And then you have dealing direct damage with weapon mastery skill causes your next core skill to make enemies vulnerable. So you have the chains doing vulnerability, Ren doing vulnerability, and then Ren doing vulnerability because of exposed vulnerability. So you need that for a while. But when you can go exploit glyph with Decimator legendary node, and if you really were stressed about it, then you could go up here and put like 1 point in pressure point. Your core skills have a 10% chance to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. You could do that. Another reason I still like to use Flay is because Flay also has a 10% chance to make an enemy vulnerable. So you still have vulnerability in your build, but now that we have a really reliable source of applying vulnerability, like first try, and then ways to extend it through the exploit glyph, you don't need chains anymore. So that's one of the big changes, okay? And when can you swap to this? Again, you can swap to it as soon as you unlock glyphs. You put exploit in there, and then you can go for it as soon as you can use it. Or you could wait a little bit longer for your second glyph slot and put it in there, and then slowly work your way up to Decimator for another just sort of passive way of getting vulnerability. Vulnerability is an important thing to have on mobs because we're scaling our vulnerability a ton, and we'll talk about that in our gear. But again, this is gonna be a lot of chatting, so stay with me here. But that was kind of like one of the biggest changes. When you look at the build, you're saying, I noticed that on your skill bar things are different. What happened? That's the main thing. So a lot of this Flay doesn't really change. We're still doing Flay, still going to enhance Flay to make enemies vulnerable. We're still going into increased bleeding damage from Flay, which is great. I mean, all of our damage that actually counts is bleeds. Making that, 10% more is good. It's very good. We have big Rend. Rend is making enemies extended vulnerable. Now, I am using the Fury Generation Rend still. Fury Generation is big. We were able to move past the 12% vulnerable to damaged enemies. If you really care and you want to like Giga Min Max, maybe you do this one later on. for like a world boss, but I don't really usually change it up. We're still going with Rallying Cry, put a couple extra points in there, which I might take out and move it around if I felt like it. Like we could put it into like Fortify effect, things like that. But of course we're getting Unstoppable. We're getting more Fury generation. We're going into Challenging Shout, going into bonus life on Challenging Shout, and Fury on when we get hit with Challenging Shout. We're going into War Cry, as, again, you know, giving us Berserking, giving us the damage reduction this time, because my Fortify generation has become a little bit more reliable, but it's going to become a lot more reliable soon, and some of the changes I made actually made my Fortify thing a little teeny bit less effective. Going into Booming Voice for longer shout duration. Shouts also heal us. It says allies, but I believe it's also me, because, I mean, that's what I notice. Now, these are new, right? These points right here gain 3% damage reduction while berserking. I put 1 point here to get this point here. While berserking, Fury generation is increased by 18%. And now, again, Chains is also a good source of berserking, but we're actually going further into berserking than we were before. We get Berserk from our War Cry, and of course we get Berserk from Wrath of the Berserker. So very, very cool. So we're basically accomplishing a lot of the goals that every character has to have. But as we progress and as we unlock Paragon and as we do different things with our gear and whatnot, we begin to sort of check the boxes with other ways, so we can come back to our skills and start to say we don't need vulnerability application with our skill tree anymore. So now we can go into buffing up our berserking, things like that, right? We're scaling through berserking, thus the BLEEDZERKER. Down here, we're doing Pit Fighter still because we like the close damage increase and the distant damage reduction. We have no Mercy, which is very important. Scaling our crit chance later in the game is very, very important because we're scaling crit damage just to pop off. So we still need No Mercy. However, we do not need any more exposed vulnerability, right? Because we're not using a weapon skill attack, weapon mastery attack. So we don't use that anymore. We still do have the slow, just to proc, you know, damage while slowed, damage while crowd controlled, things like that. And then we also do definitely want to have big damage on the bleeds, right? And then we've got down here, we also changed a few things down here. Of course, we have Wrath of the Berserker now, where we've got basically, you know, makes you berserking unstoppable for the next 10 seconds, dealing direct damage with basic attacks, grants berserking for 5 seconds, so you can kind of weave in a basic attack here and there. Every Fury you spend gives you damage bonus. You have increased movement speed and an increased Fury generation. So good, and our Fury generation is being scaled by this. So again, now that we've solved for vulnerability, we can start scaling. I'm also seeing them subs. Thank you so much, guys. We're gonna crank through this video, and then we'll start hitting you with it, hitting you with the flex. We have our maximum Fury increased by 3, just so that we can get access to healing for 9% of my max life for every 100 Fury spent, which is not a small amount when we generate so much Fury and spend so much Fury. This also scales really well with some particular pieces of gear that I have that also supplement our defenses. So then, of course, we have this beauty of a talent, Gushing Wounds, which gives our bleeds a chance to crit, and also gives them like overpower bonus too, which is cool. Again, the talent points that we could move around are, if we wanted to move some of these talents out of rage generation, we could move them into Fortify effect just to be a little tankier. If you ended up getting Rupture on if you wanted to go to the Rupture style, which I might eventually try out, I'd probably take out Wrath of Berserker, then put points into Rupture and go down the tree that way, and maybe move some points from here into Rupture. But I haven't had a sword, that Rupture sword, the Fields of Crimson or whatever, drop from me with any sort of reasonably good stat rolls, so I haven't tried it yet, but it is an option. It is an option, but that is not what the BLEEDZERKER does. The BLEEDZERKER just pumps with Rend and really fast attack speed and big crit damage and a lot of Berserk uptime and bonuses to Berserk, which is awesome. For the Paragons, this is the path that I took. And this is sort of still early Paragon, mostly with the objective of getting enough stats for the bonuses and progressing through the Paragon thing so I can get other Paragon stuff and nice nodes like that. So we're going up this way, grabbing all these stats. I had to grab a couple extra strength thingies just to make sure that we can indeed use our first glyph, which is Martial. Again, if you wanted to use Exploit here, you would need to grab a bunch of Dexterity instead of Strength. But it's easy to grab strength because we have these two nodes that give us 10 each, right? And then martial does buff the effect of these ones, so it's giving us almost double because we leveled it up quite a bit. So we go up here, we go over here, we grab our physical damage over time, we pick up hemorrhage for the 12% increased damage when enemies have been bleeding for a while. We grab the extra physical damage over time. We have not grabbed things like poison resistance yet, and armor. We have not grabbed another slot over here, which we maybe could. It may even be faster to path from here to there, but I'll take a look at that in a little bit. But we did want to grab this. We wanted to grab the damage reduction of enemies that are bleeding, and grab the damage over time. But yeah, it could be faster for me to just go down here and grab that stuff. We had to grab a little bit more dexterity, which I need to take a look at why we have that still. That might not be necessary, but we'll take a look at that later. Again, I just want to give you guys the idea of what I'm doing. This is not meant to be an expert guide of like, this is the Gigabyss endgame way to do it. A lot of times these are build updates more than just guides, but it is a fun way to keep you guys posted on the progression. And also, I think it is good for general guidance if you want to do what I'm doing, right? Got Decimator. We came over here for vulnerable damage and armor. And the next thing we're going to do after what we went up, we definitely got the glyph, right? I think I'm prioritizing the glyphs. So we have might here just because it's easy to get its strength. And we have some big strength nodes that are easy to buff that up. Now we can either go up, but what I'm probably going to do is go from here over here. And the next one I'm looking to get is Warbringer. So Warbringer is going to give us this. Every 75 Fury you spend, you gain 12% of your max life as Fortify. That will help our Fortify generation quite a bit, and that will allow us to switch out some of the things that we have in Legendary aspects. But it's going to take a while to get there. It's going to be a weird path. I could spin it around, but we'll see. But I also want the glyph slot, and I want these things, but they do require a ton of stats that I do not have. So I think what I'll do first, I'll probably just end up prioritizing going right for the glyph. So maybe I'll switch this over to something like this and just shoot right for it. Get that Fortify going, and then worry about the glyph slot a little bit later when I have more stats to go for it. So I think that'll be the plan for Paragon. So that's our skill tree. That's our Paragon. Let's talk a little bit about our gear. So as you can tell, this, like the leveling build required like nothing. It required like no gear. You can get it going with like dungeon aspects at best, if you even wanted to. The bleed build started to require a couple extra things and really pops off when you get like your Fury generation set up. It definitely does well with certain aspects. Finding that one particular legendary where it chained 5 targets instead of, or 5 chains instead of 3, all that's awesome. This one is the next progression up, right? We've made it a little bit further in our character, which unlocked Paragons for us to start subbing out some skill points for other things to scale differently. Same as the case with the gear. So again, you can probably run this build, but it's not really going to shine until you get some cooldown reduction on your helmet and cooldown reduction on your necklace. I still need to like get higher rolls. Thankfully, the cooldown reduction rolled on my necklace, but I do want to get a higher roll, so we can work on that at some point. But let's just go down the line. The important stats here is basically just the cooldown reduction. Everything else is just stats, which do help me with my Paragon. I understand that resistances are actually like not working properly, and it's better to just get more armor. So the resistance there is not a dead stat, but it's not as juicy as we'd prefer. But the willpower is fine, the strength is good, and CDR is essential. I have it imprinted with the barrier, which I could actually buff up that barrier effect because I have some aspects that are better than that. But I also am still interested in rolling a new helmet. I'm working on it right now. But this is good. You want CDR in your helmet. That's the most important thing. You'll also notice that I started gemming for life in my gems rather than Fortify effect. I still think that Fortify effect is good, but I'll tell you why we're using life in a second. Rage of Haragath, it's my last sacred item, but I would say this is another like sort of not required unique, because you can run this with like a chest that just gives you shouts like a rare and turn it into something else. That works out well with like some damage reduction, but if you can get Rage of Haragath, that's the one you want. It's got physical damage, got crit against elites, which is really, really good. You've got damage reduction for enemies that are bleeding, which is everything all the time. And it's got thorns, and we like thorns for a while. We're not using thorns now, so it's kind of like, eh. But maybe it'll kill like a bat when it hits you or something like that. But the lucky hit on it's very good. Lucky hit up to 34% chance, and it can roll up to 40. To reduce the cooldown of your non-ultimate skills by 1.5 seconds when you inflict bleeding on elites. So when you're sitting there, whack, 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 slamming with with Rends or even Flays. Both of those abilities are inflicting bleeds. You have a chance on lucky hit to reduce your cooldowns and your shouts, which is exactly what we want. That's huge. That's huge. So basically, this is another source of shout reduction, right? So you have cooldown reduction on your shouts from your helmet and necklace. You have martial glyph, and then you have, of course, our other ring, which we'll talk about in a second. But reducing the cooldowns on your shouts is a big deal because your gameplay is like shouting, rending, popping Wrath of Berserker, and it's going nuts. Very nice. So on gloves, these are pretty dang good. These are pretty dang good. I don't know what all can roll on gloves, so I don't know if that attack speed could be like crit strike damage or it could be vulnerability. I don't know. Sorry, not attack speed, physical damage over time. But I do know that they can roll critical strike chance and attack speed, and that's what they rolled. I bought these gloves off the gamble vendor. They rolled with crit, fizz, attack speed, and like intelligence or something, and I was like, okay, well, we're gonna roll that intelligence off. 1 or 2 rolls later, it became Rend. It was... we don't want that. It was 3 ranks of Rend when I bought it, and then you upgraded it, and it became 4 ranks of Rend. So remember that can happen when you upgrade your gloves. And so what I put on there, we can talk a little bit about aspects too. What I put on there was deal increased damage where we have a barrier active. Now, this is a fine enchant. I call aspects enchants, by the way, a lot. So if I say that, or I say rage, you know I mean fury. This is a fine aspect to have, but it's actually good enough that it could have gone on my weapon. But again, certain aspects are not functioning properly, so they've been, or they were like bugged or something, so they've been disabled. So I'm not doing a lot of like min-maxing on my aspects right now because they're just likely to change anyway when they get re-enabled, hopefully soon, and it's good enough. But this aspect is good enough to put on my weapons because it would be double its effectiveness. So potentially, you know, 40 to 50% increased damage while you have a barrier active, and I have barrier from here, and I have barrier from here. These pants, a very big deal. These are called Temerity. Very, very nice. They give you all stats. They buff your potion drop rate. My rolls on some important things were not that great, but they dropped, and that's insane. So the stats is fine. Potion drop rate is really neat, especially when it probably is rolled better. Lucky hit is up to a 5% chance to heal just a chunk of life, which is awesome. Thank you again for the subs. I really appreciate that. Enjoy your mounts, and thank you for getting them here. We're kind of like focused up right now trying to do a little bit of a look at our BLEEDZERKER build evolution. But thank you guys so much. So we've got 10.5 healing received, which is up to 21% healing received. It's the lowest possible roll, but again, the pants are good, especially for the effect, right? Effects that heal you beyond 100% life grant you a barrier up to 48%, and that's also a like really low roll of your maximum life that lasts for 8 seconds. It's just they're so good, it's hard to pass up the effects that they give, right? That's big. You basically will have a barrier rolling on your character like all the time, right? Unless you get hit really hard. But we have barrier from this. Now we have barrier that's like a burst barrier when we're fighting an elite, and then a consistent barrier when we're just doing anything. So that's why I went ahead and rolled max life. I think max life is just a good stat anyway. I don't have like plus life on like any piece of gear, but I did want to buff my life up a little bit to buff that barrier up a little bit. So I don't know if Fortify is going to scale better for me than max life, but I wanted to sort of see if I could synergize with that effect a little bit more. That being said, I do have fairly low life, and buffing my life makes it harder for me to get fortified, so that's kind of a risk, and that's the kind of thing that will be solved by Warbringer later. But it is kind of a defensive liability. If you're buffing your HP, it's harder to get fortified, so just remember that, right? Remember that. These dropped in tier 4. They're very nice. They came with pretty bad rolls, but I think the effects make it worth using. Just the extra healing. But no, you could absolutely, again, if you don't have Temerity, you could absolutely be using just some really good pants that give you, what's it called? Like just a bunch of defenses, like defense to close, defense from distant. You know, I can probably show you the pants that I used to be using. But I'm also realizing right now, looking at my aspects, that I may want to just rely on the barrier from this because I have 2 uniques on right now. I may just want to rely on the barrier from this because I'm just now realizing I don't have the armor stacking. I don't have the Defiance aspect, which I really, really like. So The barriers are cool, and I do feel a little bit tanky, but I think I would like to have that armor increase. So I need to find a way to get that on the build, and I think it's the helmet. I think the temerity pants solve my barrier situation, and then this helmet needs to become no longer barrier, it needs to become the defense. Whenever you deal damage, it increases your armor by like 0.5% up to 50%, that kind of thing. We're gonna want that back on my character, so I'm glad that we noticed that right now. It does scale with HP pool. That's why I'm buffing that's why I'm putting my gems into reds. Yeah. Yep. Okay. We have some pretty cool boots. Pretty cool boots. Movement speed. Things that I'm looking on for boots are fury cost reduction. I think movement speed is great. You don't really need it when you're standing still attacking, but one of the fun things about this build is that once you get attack speed and movement speed going, you kind of just like cruise and shred through mobs pretty good. But fury cost reduction is like the stat that you want to look for on boots. So that's important. I don't know every stat that drops on every piece, but I can tell you that those are pretty important, right? So I also have plus stats and berserking duration. In addition to that, plus stats are always nice. It's super low rolled plus stats, so my gear is definitely not like min-maxed, but it's working all right pretty far. This thing is nuts, actually. This is a great weapon. Almost 800 eye level. Crit damage, vulnerability damage, damage 2, and it's crowd controlled, so it's like almost 50% extra, and then plus stats. Or all stats. All stats, again, maybe not the sweetest thing to have on a weapon, because weapons can get crazy stuff, but the all stats helps me achieve the Paragon stat requirements for some of those nice like rare nodes. And you'll notice I'm also socketing in crit strike to vulnerable enemies rather than dot damage now. The reason why we're doing that, and the key component to that, is having a healthy amount of crit. So I have 36% crit flat, which is actually 45% crit against the bleeding enemies, which is literally anything that we're hitting. And then that becomes like 55% almost crit strike against elites. So at that point, we're critting over half the time. We can start to go into, and everything's vulnerable all the time pretty much. So now we can start saying, okay, instead of 8% dot, we're gonna do 12% crit. And you're obviously you're benefiting from the crit because we have our talent that lets our whole bleed stack crit upon application. And then I don't love this aspect that we have on there, but I chucked it on there because I needed something and I didn't have all the stuff that I wanted. So I chucked this on there. It's not the worst. You have a 40% increased critical strike chance against injured enemies. So like those elites, when they're like below 35% health, wham! One rend, dang near guaranteed crits. They're 100% dead. 100% dead. So there's that. Now, if you were playing like Stomp instead of Wrath of the Berserker, that 80% increased crowd control duration would be good for you. You can play Stomp with this too if you wanted. I think Wrath of the Berserker is fun because you can scale Berserk, which is cool. But yeah, that's okay. I think another one that I would be interested in using is the Absorb one for just more damage. Or whenever you overcap your rage, you get a damage bonus. That's fine. You can also do the one where standing still gives you a damage bonus. The only problem with that is I think the standing still one is capped on the top end. I really don't want to mess around with my inventory too long and like determine if that's actually the case. But anyway, that might be the case, and if it is the case, then it doesn't having it on a two-hander doesn't really matter. But I mean, I have way too many aspects, and none of them are the ones that I want with for this situation right here. I wish I could use the Edge Masters again, but anyway. See, I'm a little bit low on my offensive ones, so we have to kind of make some decisions and just roll with it. So that's what I decided to roll with there. Anyway, the overcapping rage, the standing still are half decent. I don't like to stand still when I'm playing this class though, so I don't. On my one-handers, this is okay. This could also be on your weapon, but the only problem is, again, all you're doing is doubling the amount that it increases like per swing, not the cap. So this is not actually a good one for your two-hander. Basic skills increase damage of your core cast. I'm not basic attacking a lot, but I do sometimes. So this is fine. This one is something I would probably look to replace once I get the Edge Masters, and I'll tell you what I'd replace it with in the next weapon. But I like basic attacks give attack speed. I've enjoyed that for a long time, just because it's quality of life, and attack speed's really fun. Let me talk about the weapons real quick though. They've got critical strike damage, vulnerable damage, damage 2, and strength. This is the stat line you want. You want crit strike damage, you want vulnerable damage, you want some sort of damage too. Bleeding is not the highest possible roll. I think close can get really high. As we saw, crowd-controlled enemies can get really high. Bleeding doesn't really get that high, but it is a max rolled. And then strength. Those are really good. You want like a crit, a vuln, a 2, or a with, and then strength is really, really good. Again, if you guys haven't seen the exclamation mark buckets video, you can type exclamation mark buckets in the chat, and it'll link you an excellent video from my sponsor Mobalytics teaching you about how damage works in terms of additive increases or multiplicative increases. So you kind of want to spread out the multiplicative increases on your gear rather than the additive ones. So just keep that in mind. This weapon right here, it's got damage while, vulnerable, core, which are different buckets, but not crit damage, which is not what we're hoping for. Eventually, I'll try to reroll the damage while berserking into crit damage or find a new weapon. But I do want swords here. It's important to have one-handed swords for the crit strike damage. But yeah, then it gives me basic attack speed. What I would eventually do, though, is I'd put ripping on one of these, I'd put edge masters on the other two-hander, and I would put this core skills. Crits with core skills increase your attack speed by a certain percent. I love this. I put it on my two-hander, and it's super fun. But I would move this over to my one-hander, so we can actually hit harder and not just faster. We've crafted this weapon. It's not amazing, but it's getting the job done for now. Again, I'd like to reroll that core skill damage to vulnerable damage, but we also might just find another weapon along the way anyway. Yeah, crit first, vuln second, damage to bleeding third, hopefully strength for last one on one-hand weapons. Yeah, you want crit, vuln, something like core, damage 2, damage with, like overall damage, and then strength, just for the flat stat. Because then you have all these multiplicative modifiers and then a flat stat. So those are excellent. Yeah, that's my understanding. And that could change. I'm learning too. That could change. But this is a good weapon. This is a good one. It works for now. But I want vulnerability damage on that. We're stacking vulnerable damage like crazy. Again, to go over my necklace, we have berserking duration. So the two stats that you want on your necklace, fury cost reduction and cooldown reduction. That's what I really like a lot. Those are excellent. That helps you just chop like crazy. It keeps your shouts rolling. Helps you chop like crazy. Berserking duration is fine. We are berserk a lot. We are the BLEEDZERKER after all. So that's fine. And damage reduction. I don't know if I'd really want defensive stats on my my necklace. I don't know all what it can drop, but or all what it can roll, but I don't think I want defense. I think I'm going to rely on defense through other means. But my character is a little light on the defense right now, and I think as you progress into higher and higher nightmare tiers, which is where you're going to find the real challenge in this game, your defense is going to be the thing that holds you back, I think. But anyway, we'll figure that out. These rings are excellent. We have resource generation on ring. We have crit strike damage on the ring. We have vulnerable damage on the ring. And we have crit chance on the ring. That's wild. That is a very, very nice item. I don't know what else I would want on that thing besides resource generation, crit strike, vulnerable, and crit chance. I think you could like only get crit chance on rings. I don't know if you can get it on a necklace, but you can definitely get it on your two rings, and so you definitely want crit on your rings. Very, very important. Oh, and by the way, each point of fury generated while at maximum fury grants fortify. That's like my dang near only source of fortify generation, which is a little bit risky. A little bit risky. But when we get Warbringer, it'll help. It's fine, it works, but I'd like to have a more reliable fortify generation, and I would like to have fortify generation that didn't rely on me sitting at overcap fury, because I want to be spending fury like crazy, and Warbringer will give me fortify from spending fury like crazy. Well, this does give me a lot, so having both of them wouldn't be bad, but eventually I might like to change this, especially because your necklace gives you like the 1.5 bonus multiplier on the aspect. But yeah, this one is imprinted with shout skills, generate 3 fury per second while active. You can dungeon aspect this for 2 fury per second, but I found one with 3, and that worked. But yes, this is a nutty ring. Very, very nice. I don't know if how I'm gonna replace that one. This one right here, also pretty good. Pretty good. We tried to roll this a couple times, and the best thing we got was damage over time with a pretty weak roll. But we'll make some more gold, and we'll put another, 1.5 to 2 million per roll into it, and we'll see if we can get it to go vulnerable. Oh, wait, no, sorry, not vulnerable. Crit damage. Crit damage, because we have crit strike, damage 2, and vulnerable. So those are great. Damage to close is really good because it ends up rolling pretty high, which is nice. So it's a big percent. But yeah, we want crit strike chance on that. You have to have crit chance on your rings. It would be nice. I mean, I might even take resource generation over crit damage, maybe, on this ring if I could get it, because those are the stats that we really want. You want, like, crit chance, I think, is the most important, and then resource generation is fantastic, along with vulnerable and crit damage. I think those are the things I'm looking for the most, in my build in particular, because my guy is, like, we're old school with this dude. We're, like, going, like, crit and attack speed, and just popping off, and we're doing it with Ren, which is kind of funny, because it's a bleed. But I think it's just a fun playstyle. I like it a lot. And once again, you guys will see that in videos that I'm posting. But that is a long overview of this build. But it is something that I wanted to give you an idea of the progression of the build. At what point can you make this jump? Basically, it all starts with the exploit glyph. And at that point, you can begin to decide how you want to, you know, work with your shouts, because if you use exploit, then your shouts are going to be on a longer cooldown. The shouts are also very important for this, so I'd recommend that you at least get your first 2 paragons so you can have exploit, or first 2 glyphs, so you can at least have exploit and martial, ideally, and then it gets even better when you can get decimator for the vulnerability application. So that's all that stuff. Obviously, better gear is going to be helpful to you. The more paragon points you get is going to be helpful to you. That's kind of the path I took, right? And then, of course, the things that are the most important: helmet, cooldown reduction; necklace, cooldown reduction; rings, crit, vulnerable, crit damage, that sort of thing. Chest, ideally you get the Rage of Haragath. If not, you're just going to probably take, like, damage reduction sources and, like, a buff to one of your shouts, maybe, like, challenging or rallying. With pants, it's probably going to be the same kind of thing. Try to get, like, a plus skills that works for you. I don't know if pants roll. Do pants roll battle shout? Is that what it is? War Cry? Pants can probably roll War Cry, I think, with other reductions, and then getting all stats on gear is excellent too. And then for your aspects, one of your defensive aspects needs to be that that disobedience or whatever it's called. This guy, where is it? I think I have one of them in here. Maybe I have it actually in my thing. Yeah, disobedience. Yeah, I don't have an insane one, but 45% is probably what I'm gonna put on maybe my helmet. And then at some point, I'd like to work in this healing life per second per close enemy instead of maybe the fortify, so that I can start really working on that barrier generation, right? That would be another cool move. Once I get Warbringer, I can take the fortify off my necklace. My fortify will hopefully just be completely solved by Warbringer, and then we can do something cool like this, which synergizes with barrier generation. But I think I do need to put disobedience on my helmet, and we'll do that today. But yeah, that's the build. That's the BLEEDZERKER. The video's already, you know, dang near 40 minutes, so we're not going to include gameplay in this one, but we are doing gameplay, like, every day, live on Twitch, and we have lots of other videos for you guys to check out as well on YouTube, with many more on the way. Hope this guide gives you an idea of what we're working with, and of course, stay tuned for more, because I do enjoy trying different things in this game, and we've been cooking up some pretty fun builds so far. I really love the fact that we've been tracking the progression the whole time. It starts with the Thorns bleed, goes into the T4 bleed, now we're in the BLEEDZERKER Super Saiyan Ascension. It's really cool, and I'm having a blast with this game. Hopefully you guys are too. Once again, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to give the video a big thumbs up, leave a nice comment, subscribe for more, and then of course come hang out with us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Bajheera. We'll either be live or running VODs, so you can catch up on the content, and gonna have a good time. Either way, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.